This story begins February 8, 2006, here in Benton Harbor, Michigan, a town of about 10,000 people. Two of them, Jameel McGee and former police officer Andrew Collins.
So, Mel, you are on your way to see your son for the very first time, and you get arrested. Take me back to that day.
Yeah, I was. My son's mother was on her way to bring him to me for the first time. Our relationship was kind of rocky, so this was a good thing, you know. So I had just got pulled over earlier that morning for driving on suspended license. So I was like, I didn't want to drive. I didn't want to take that chance. So my cousin's friend was at the house, and I was living with my aunt at this time, and I asked him, can I get a ride? And he said, okay, cool, fine, I'll take you over there. And we get over there, I get my phone, I go inside the store. And when I came out of the store, this guy was approaching me, talking about he's a cop and where's the dope? And I'm like, what dope? And I kept walking around him because I'm like, I ain't got time for this. You know what I'm saying? Whoever you are, let me go and get home. And he was like, no, and reached out his badge and was like, yeah, where's the dope? And I'm like, oh man, I ain't got nothing. And I dropped my bags and, you know, he searched me, and he searched me twice, and still found nothing. And then that time I was just like, okay, I don't got nothing. I started to unbuckle my pants and just let my pants fall, and I was just like, I don't got nothing. We get to the station and I was being booked for possession with intent to deliver crack cocaine.
Not only booked, but convicted. And Andrew, you're that officer.
That's correct.
You see signs. You can clearly see as he is telling you he has nothing, but you pursue anyway. Why?
Yeah, so that morning I had caught a guy with some crack cocaine, and he made a phone call and said that he was ordering crack from this big-time drug dealer that I had heard of before. Had never met the guy, but now that guy is the target in my brain. I'm going after this big-time drug dealer. It's going to advance my career, all those ego boosters. So he tells me what vehicle they're going to be in, where they're going to be. I show up, the vehicle's there, and there's one guy in the vehicle, but he's got some physical disabilities, and I knew my guy didn't. So I said, okay, that's not the guy. He's involved, but where's my guy? And then Jameel comes out of the store, and I thought, there's my guy. He looked like a drug dealer. What the heck does a drug dealer look like, right? He wasn't dressed much differently than he is now. And I can tell you, my boy's not a drug dealer, right? So I approached him and thought, there's my guy. So I initiated the conversation with him in a very arrogant, very boastful, I got you type of way. There was really drugs brought there that day, not by Jameel. He just caught a ride with the guy. But by the end of the day, he's sitting in jail under the wrong name because I thought he was the guy. So it was 2 days later, the fingerprints came back that's Jameel McGee, not the guy I was looking for. So that should have, if the system doesn't fail, that should release him right there. But what happens is the FBI calls me and says, what's going on with this? We thought you had our guy. And I just made up a story and said, oh, I just confused the names. It was really Jameel McGee. And I wrote a supplemental report and later lied at his trial and in front of a jury and in front of a judge, and he was convicted.
And this is not the first time you had done that.
And by the end of my career, I was planting drugs at crime scenes. I was taking money off people. I was taking money from the city that I worked for. I had fallen so far, so fast, and it all blew up in my face.
Andrew finds himself in prison, serving time for locking up innocent men like Jameel.
In jail, what are you thinking? You have not seen your son that you were going to see for the very first time. You have all these years in jail, and you know that you're in there for something you didn't do.
I was just thinking of anger and how I can get back and harming him. Actually, I made a goal for myself to hurt him as soon as I got home.
So you do get out some years later, and eventually you see him.
Yeah.
Do you hurt him?
The guy had a different plan.
He had a different plan.
Yeah, and it wasn't mine. So, and at that moment, when I saw him and I was squeezing his hand, and my mind, myself, the flesh was telling me to hit this man. You're gonna do what you gotta do, get it over with. And my son was right there. In that moment, I'm like, man, I'm teaching my son firsthand how to make these mistakes.
Wow.
You know, so no, I don't want to hurt him. You know, and God had already worked it out on me to, you know, to let this thing go, because holding that and dealing with that was far more complicated than doing this.
How do you receive that forgiveness?
This was about a year after I got out of prison. We run into each other in Benton Harbor, and that day I apologized to him, but it didn't come across as if he had forgiven me. That day didn't end the way that I wanted it to. But then God brought us back together 4 years later through the cafe that I was working at. And that day, as we sat and talked, I started apologizing to Jameel again because I felt like God had given me a second chance to say I'm sorry. And he was almost offended. He was leaning away from me. He was like, stop it. It's over. It's forgiving. You meant it that day in the park, and you mean it now.
Yeah.
Stop it. And I said, Jameel, can we walk this thing out as friends? He said, I think God wants us to.